All right, well, we'll get started. Gosh, this thing is pretty far away. I don't know, is anybody taking, where's the, over here? Are we recorded? Yes. Okay, we're good, we're good. All right, we have Senator Johnson with us. Well, I will make note that we will begin the hearing and make note that Senator Crow, Senator Johnson, and Senator Watson are here present. We don't have a quorum, but we can issue advisory opinions, and so we'll proceed at this point then with the Soil Scientists Advisory Committee, which is a sunrise, brand new, first hearing, and I think we'll begin with is Ms. Wiseman here, who will respond to some of the questions that the committee had. Ms. Wiseman, you're recognized.
Good morning.
Welcome.
I think it's on. Hi, I'm Catherine Wiseman. I'm Chief Counsel for Regulatory Boards with the Department of Commerce and Insurance. This is Donna Mulder. She is the Director of the Soil Scientist Licensing Program. Would you like me to read the summary of the...
If you would, just
okay.
highlight some of the...
Okay, the Soil Scientist Licensing Act was passed earlier this year, and the program will be effective July 1st, 2011. The Soil Scientists Advisory Committee consists of 5 people. As yet has not been appointed by our commissioner. We are working on getting the program up and running administratively at this point, and we do expect to appoint a committee by the end of the year in order to help us with the technical aspects of the program and with the rulemaking process, et cetera.
How did this all, just quickly, how did this all come about? What was the need for an advisory committee dealing with soil scientists, the soil, I guess? What was the need there that led to the development of this committee?
This was not an administration bill. This was a bill that was brought by Representative Tidwell, and I believe was instigated by the Soil Scientists Association of Tennessee. They were
okay. So it came from those that are in it. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Questions, Senator Watson?
Thank you for being here this morning. Tell me now, the committee there have been no appointments made as of yet.
Right.
And the reason for that?
At this point, we've just been doing a lot of sort of behind-the-scenes administrative work, getting the program up and running as far as working on the IT, drafting some rules and things like that. So just at this point, we haven't really had a need to have a committee to advise the program staff, but we will very soon.
I need to ask legal counsel, Dr. Garrett, a question here. If this is a sunrise, typically sunrises occur after the first 2 years. Why are we, if this was created and just started in last year, why are we hearing them now? I see they have a sunset termination of June of 2011, but
typically, with Mr. Chairman, we do place a 2-year sunrise provision in startup agencies. It may have been just something that was information that was specific to the sponsors of the bill or just the way it was drafted, but typically, yes, they are given 2-year extensions. I'm not aware of why this particular entity was given just 1 year.
Because Mr. Chairman, because what we usually do when we form these is we give them 2 years so they can do all the stuff that they're referring to. There's really doesn't appear to be anything to hear today because they're not yet operational. So we might suggest to the full committee, because I assume we'll hear this in full committee, that we might want to change the sunset from June of 2011 to June of 2012. That would put it in the proper 2-year ramp-up time that we've traditionally utilized.
That's a motion. All in favor, say aye. Well, I thought about that in my best. Okay. Yes, is there input from the public on this at this time? I don't think so. Seeing none, then we're back to Senator Watson, who has a motion.
Right. Well, I would suggest that we recommend to the full committees in the House and the Senate that we extend the sunset termination date to June 2012, and then we'll follow the procedure that we have always
This will be in
followed.
the form of an opinion. And so with that, are the members in accord? All in favor say aye. Aye. So we're good there. I would, before you leave, like to just give us a good picture of the mission of this committee. What's the purpose and mission? What is this committee to do?
Well, the committee is going to advise the program staff on the technical aspects of the program. As far as soil science, we don't have any. I mean, I'm just a lawyer.
Right.
I don't know anything about that. So they'll be helping us with the rulemaking process and the continuing education and things like that, and identifying any other areas where we may need to create rules in order to adequately regulate the profession.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. So we'll look forward to hearing from you, I think, at the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Commission sunset review. And so we're really following up on the Commission's response to the 2009 Performance Audit Report. And I think we'll recognize Mr. Ed Carter, Executive Director, TWRA. Ed? Either way, you're fine, yeah.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Senator, members of the committee. I'm Ed Carter, the Executive Director of the agency. This is Nat Johnson, our Legislative Affairs and Fiscal Person. I appreciate the opportunity to come back down and make a few comments. I did notice in the agenda the performance items that you outlined there in our last performance audit. I'd be glad to comment on those if you like. Or
Members, discussion, questions?
Well, I would like for you to update us on what has transpired since the 2009 performance audit in those areas that were highlighted there.
Okay, thank you. There were 4 findings in there, and just go down through each one of the findings. We feel like we've complied with the necessary items in the finding and made whatever changes we needed to make to come into compliance. The first one deals with paddlefish. As you remember, there was a sanction put on by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that dealt with exports from Kentucky Lake. That's still in place. That's still a federal finding, which we obviously have little control over. The Commission is looking at the commercial fishing regulations each year as they do and as they're updated. And that's subject to change at any particular time through the Commission on what the regulations are. But there's been no sanctions or funds withheld by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It's just been business as normal. It's just that you can't export roe from one part of Kentucky Lake. The other one dealt with a weapons inventory system that really relates to firearms and that we use in our hunter education program. There were a number of those, I'm trying to remember, I think 2 or so, that were unaccounted for at the time of the audit. And at that particular time, those are used by our hunter education instructors. There are about 1,100 of those across the state, and they rotate from person to person as they're having different classes, and sometimes the person that checks those out lets their buddy use them because they have a class coming the next week and so forth. So we've addressed that. We have a statewide uniform policy on how those are handled now as opposed to a regional policy, which was at the time of the audit. So we've determined that we have a good handle on how that is. There's a NCR paper that's signed by each person that checks those out, and a follow-up form that's followed by each gun or by each bow and arrow that the instructor uses as it goes across the state. And those persons are held responsible along with the regional personnel that utilize those in the program. The other dealt with the cooperative farming contracts. Those are things primarily on our wildlife management areas where we enter into contracts with farmers to either leave a portion of a crop or to manipulate that particular part of the land some way that relates to a wildlife management plan for that particular area. There was only a 4% error rate, which accounted to 1 out of 25 contracts. Essentially, was just that we didn't have the right forms in the same file at the same place. There was one in a regional office as opposed to being in our Nashville office, so it wasn't tracked. We have changed the way we do that as well. We've changed all of the contracts that have to do with agricultural leases, put them in our wildlife division, and assigned one person to do nothing but agricultural leases. The data reliability of the REAL system, is our computerized system that we sell licenses on and permits and those things across the state. Again, the performance audit was relating to the fact that didn't feel like we had done appropriate testing before we implemented a particular program. We had been doing the testing. Obviously, we have to do that before we can actually implement the program to know if it's going to work. The problem was that we weren't documenting it, and since then we've implemented a system that does allow us to document it. So those were the 4 findings, and we feel like we've complied with what we needed to do to bring those into compliance.
I think one of the Annette and I talked. We talked the other day, and since then I have heard comments on an issue relative to the slot limit situation. I know we had a situation that came up wherein there were several of the legislators that had issues that they wanted to be looked at and dealt with relative to slot limits, and evidently a resolution that was non-binding was brought forth and recommending action, and I think the agency decided not to take that action. So there is some controversy out there and some discussion taking place now relative to that. What's the deal with that? Give us an update on that, if you have any information on that.
Pretty much what you just said. There was
and why the recommendations of the legislators were not taken into account.
Well, I think that it was. The slot limit was not changed. It was when it was implemented. There was a series of hearings held throughout that area up there, or at least public meetings in each of those counties, with the exceptions of one. There was no negative comment about that at the time. The thing was implemented in Knoxville. Actually, it was where the commission passed it, essentially right in the back door of Norris Lake. The biggest opposition seemed to come from tournament fishermen who felt like that would impact their ability to have big tournaments in those lakes and to draw those people there. In conjunction with some of the work that we had done with the local people there and asking our creel clerks to poll people as they talked with them on the water, the commission looked at that, felt like that it hadn't been given long enough to see if it was going to work. It generally takes 3 to 5 years to find out if a slot limit like that will actually produce the effects. So they felt like they understood that some of the legislators had a concern because of some of the local county commissions had voiced some of the same concerns, but felt like that they would try it for one more year and would revisit it each year. And that's the way they left the meeting, that they would readdress that at every season setting, which occurs in October.
I might add that this controversy among different groups of fishermen is not a new issue on Norris Lake. And several years ago, there was formed the Norris Lake Advisory Committee, and what their role was to advise the commission of what they thought should take place on Norris Lake, because there are a lot of competing groups up there. There are 25 people on that group. That group met. They were aware of the actions by these county commissions, and they kind of go on a consensus basis, and their consensus was to continue with the slot limit as it was. Now, they meet every year, and they make a recommendation back to the commission of what they think should go on at Norris Lake. It's not a binding recommendation, but the commission generally lies pretty heavily on that, and they've not changed their recommendation. And that committee up there is made up of 25 people. There are elected officials on there, or their appointees. They're marina owners. They're from affiliated fishing groups. They're non-affiliated fishing groups. So we think it's a pretty good cross section of the community and not necessarily dominated by any one group. And they have stuck by this recommendation that has everybody knows will take, as the director said, more than 1 year to implement. And it worked at Dale Hollow Lake, very successful. They would fight just as hard to not have it removed up there. So I think that led into the commission's decision also to stay with the recommendation of the slot limit, not go back where it was.
Okay. Members, questions, comments, discussion? Senator Watson is recognized.
Not having as much detailed knowledge of the Norris Lake situation with a smallmouth bass, I'm not sure I understand your answer when you say it's not go back to the prior slot limit. So the resolution, and this is, of course, an important issue to Senator Falk, our colleague, and was an important issue to Representative Faulkner when he served here. Is the slot length now consistent with the resolution that this body passed, and that is 5 per day with a minimum length of 18 inches? Okay.
No, the slot limit that's in place is the one that the commission passed originally, which, well, I can't remember exactly how it works myself, but there's so many fish below, so many fish above, with the slot limit in the middle of a no take. So to allow those fish to become larger on the upper end before they're taken again. But anyway, that's the one that still is in place. It's the same one that, as Nat was talking about, the same one that we ran through the Norris Lake Advisory Committee originally, and that's the one that was consensus there, and that's the one that's still in place.
So the one that's in place is the one that created the controversy in the first place.
That's
correct. Okay. Tell me a little bit more about this advisory committee of 25 members. How are people appointed to that advisory committee?
There are county commissions have an appointment that they can make to that. There are members of standing clubs that are put on there as well. And Nat, do you remember the rest of the makeup?
Here, and this is not a legal entity.
I'm sorry, sir, I didn't hear you.
It's not a legal entity of any kind. It's not recognized in code or formed anywhere. It's more of a citizens advisory group that was put together to try to resolve issues. And it came about when stripers were introduced up there, and there was a lot of controversy among the different fishing groups about what should happen with there. Just to remember, there are 5 people appointed from the 5 surrounding counties. The county mayor, I believe, appoints 5 people. There are 5 marina owners. There are 5 people from I believe it's the Striped Bass Association. There's 5 people from, I believe, a tournament fishing group, and there's 5 that are not affiliated, 5 fishermen that are not affiliated. And these groups just get together and say who they want their representatives to be. And then that group meets annually. The agency provides a technical overview of the lake, provides all of our creel data, any recommendations. If they ask to bring this up, this issue of changing from the 5 fish to the 2 fish and the limit that you couldn't catch has been before that commission for quite some time without a great deal of controversy. And as the director said, 4 of those county commissions had a presentation made to them about this change prior to this advisory committee meeting, and there was no opposition to it. Then the advisory committee met, made a recommendation. Some of the local tournament fishermen up there got pretty upset over the recommendation. We actually asked that advisory group come back together. They came back together after this controversy was known, and they stuck by their recommendation. Now, was it a unanimous, all 25 people in favor of it? No, but it was the consensus of the group to move forward with that.
Are the tournament fishers represented on the advisory committee?
Yes, sir. They certainly are.
And is advisory committee, is it subject to sunshine laws?
No, it is not a legal entity of any kind. It does not have a chairman. It doesn't have a director. It doesn't have staff. It's these people get together once a year to make a recommendation.
So their opinion, it's not really a recommendation then, their opinion that they give to the wildlife
That's correct.
has no greater merit or standing than an individual citizen's opinion.
I would think that it has greater standing in the fact that it was a consensus opinion of a group of 25 people representing essentially a majority, or they wouldn't reach a consensus. So in that effect, we feel like it has greater weight than an individual, but certainly has no legal binding.
Is their vote made public?
Well,
If I wanted to know out of 25 people, was it 13-12 or was it 24-1? Is that information made public?
yes, sir. I can show you the video of the entire meeting. They don't vote. They try to get to a consensus. It's they try not to say there's 13-12 or something like that. They try to there's a facilitator there, and they try to get with it to a consensus. Now, they did not reach a consensus on this last one, so since they did not make a recommendation, the previous one stood. And that's kind of where it was. It was a very interesting meeting. Heretofore, they have been able to reach a consensus among the group, and it's not are you for it or against it, but is there just something here you can't live with, and that would be changed? It's not a formal group where they sit.
Right. I'm not as privy to all the dialogue that has occurred relative to this issue, but I find it interesting that you have a group that reaches a consensus, but yet there's no apparent way of measuring that consensus. If there is no vote taken, I mean, how do you determine that there? Do you say, and I have not watched the videotape, so forgive my ignorance, but do you say, okay, does anybody have a problem with this? And if no one says they have a problem, then the assumption's made, well, we have consensus and we will move this opinion forward to TWRA. Is that?
There's an independent facilitator at these meetings, and you described it basically what happens. They say, here's an issue on the table. Who can live with this? Who's got a problem with this issue? Okay, you know, some people over here have got some opposition to the issue. Maybe give and take over here, give and take over here. And what happened was, since there was not a consensus of any one particular change, either to keep the slot limit as it was, to make a change to it, the recommendation stayed where there was a previous consensus to say, let's go with this new slot limit.
And I'm sorry to dwell on this advisory, which has you have no control over. Apparently, it's just a forum, really. But it's sort of appears to be kind of the linchpin of where some of the decisions relative to Norris Lake would emanate from.
Yes.
The people who serve on this, are they have specific terms that they serve? 1 year, 2 year?
So there have been some people on there have been on the life of the committee. Some people, they rotate off. They don't want to do it anymore, so either they would be like the county mayors would appoint somebody new to represent them. There were several new ones at the last time that they met. The striped bass fishermen, they had 5 on there, and 2 of them said, I don't want to do it anymore. Their club would get together and say, okay, here's 2 new people. They can go.
So hypothetically speaking, since there's no structure and no real formality to this organization, if I wanted to form another committee and put together a group of 25 people and rendered an opinion from that group and offered that opinion, it would carry the same weight as this group would carry, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the whole reason for this group is as I said, Norris Lake is not a stranger to controversies among different groups of citizens who enjoy that facility. And this was formed years ago to work through some of those issues. And I think that they did work through those issues in the past. Did it come about, in a very quick time frame? No. I think a lot of those things had to go about. In the types of changes we're talking about, it's not like you change the speed limit and there's immediate change in the speed limit. If you want to see this lake go into what would be called a trophy lake, or a lake that would attract more outside tourists because of its standing in the smallmouth bass community. You don't change the regulation in the book and that immediately take place. You have to give those fish the time to grow, to reach those limits, and it was proven that worked in Dale Hollow. And Dale Hollow went from a mediocre lake to a world-class smallmouth bass lake that has tourism and the recreational industry avid there year-round. And that's what they're trying to do, is give this a chance to work at Norris Lake to try to improve those opportunities for tourism and economic development. I think you see the economic development around Dale Hollow Lake has been tremendous. Some of the people from Dale Hollow Lake actually came and spoke to the group and given some video testimony about what they thought of it before and what they think of it now.
Well, and I applaud the efforts of TWRA working with a citizen organization. I think it's critical that we have, on a myriad of issues, not the least of which is Norris Lake, is that we have citizens' input and that we allow forums and opportunities for citizens to provide input. Somewhat of the disconnect that I'm having a difficult time with is that you have an entity that is speaking as if they are a legal entity with standing, and they, according to what I've heard, unless I've misunderstood what you've told me, it is just an organization that was put together. They have no greater standing than any other organization that might have, and yet
Correct.
What little press I have read about this, you will hear, I have seen a quote from someone who is a member of this advisory committee speaking in what I would interpret, obviously from my questioning of you, a tone of this is an entity that has legal standing with the TWRA by virtue of its creation, and yet there's no appointing process, there are no terms established for it. There's no real accountability to that advisory committee because, in effect, it's simply a group of citizens selected by certain people to serve and provide what TWRA interprets as community input and community interest. Is that a fair characterization?
It absolutely is, Senator, but I think we can go back through the press and you can find some quote in the press on this subject that will say it is an entity, it's not an entity, it has standing, it doesn't have standing, there are people appointed correctly, they weren't appointed, who's the chairman, who's the vice chairman, and there's just a tremendous amount of discussion about the issue.
If I could make just one
Yes, sir.
One
Yes.
little statement about that. I think it's kind of important to note in a couple of things, and that was talking about the creation of that advisory committee. It's over 20 years old, and it began when those striper controversies were up there. A group of citizens came together and worked out a solution on their own. It's not binding on the commission. They do not obviously have to take whatever advice they get from the advisory committee, but over those 20-plus years they have on each occasion. And I think, Senator Crow, that was one of the reasons they stuck with the recommendation that they had before them, because that's what had worked out the controversies in the past. They thought it might go forward again. It's also kind of interesting to note that the recommendation that the agency took before the advisory committee was actually changed by the advisory committee initially. They wanted it more stringent than the agency came forward with. So that was the original one. Since then, as Matt said, there's been no change in that, either because they couldn't reach a new consensus, and we actually did ask them to meet earlier than normal to try to come up with what their recommendation would be while the legislature was still in session, so we'd have some feedback there. So just to note, I guess, that they're not a legal entity. They have no standing in terms of the commission has to take their recommendation, but they always have.
Well, again, let me be clear. I applaud the efforts when citizens get together, especially of their own choosing, and help work out problems and don't depend on the government to do that for them. I applaud that. I just wanted to, the reason I asked those questions about their recommendations versus any other person's, or their opinion versus any other opinion, is that you have, the agency had conflicting opinions before it. You had the opinion of this advisory committee before you. You also had the opinion of this General Assembly before you through resolution. And does a resolution from this elected body have greater standing before the TWRA or the TWRC than a opinion rendered by an entity that, by all intents and purposes, does not have legal standing with the TWRA in the same fashion that an elected legislative body does? That's why I ask, if another entity put together an opinion and rendered that opinion, does it have greater or less standing before the commission? And then at that point, when you have conflicting opinions, as you do in this situation, how does the TWRA or how does the TWRC determine which one has the greater standing? So you've helped clarify that for me this morning.
That commission will meet again in the spring, and all this information will be back before them, and we will make absolutely sure that this House resolution is back before them, stating the opinion of the House on this subject. So, I mean, and then they will make the recommendations for the next year out of that. But yes, that information will be put before, and it's before the commission also.
And I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it just for the record, and that is the commission makes its decisions as best possible based on good science and good biological information and good economic development information. Would that be a correct assertion?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just interject that as a legislator, when I put forth a resolution of any kind, really, especially if it's an urging or a recommendation sort of resolution, I always do so knowing that the people that I represent in the district are favorable to my doing that. I'm always very apprehensive, with those things, because what you're doing is you're sending something forward that actually, essentially, is you're saying this is the opinion of my district, and not me as a legislator, because those things always are going to be made public, and so you want to make sure that it's your constituents that you're representing. So I would think, relative to sending that message and standing and those sorts of things that Senator Watson talked about, the resolution really is the opinion in the opinion of the legislators that put it forward, is the opinion of their district, and at least a majority of the people that they've talked with, that they're hearing. Anyway, that said, yes.
If I could just make one question or one comment there. One of the things the commission wrestled with was, were they actually hearing from the majority of the people? And I know you all wrestle with that question every day. The tournament fishermen are an organized group of people who can mount campaigns very quickly, whereas the general fisherman who is not affiliated with the group has a tougher time putting forward the same type of campaign. And I think the commission was at least worried that they weren't hearing from the majority, they were just hearing from those who were more vocal. And I think that had an awful lot to do with how they went forward and saying, let's give it one more year and see where we go. Certainly, I don't want to leave the impression at all that they didn't take seriously the resolution that came forward from this body as they would any other direction that they got.
Right. Okay. Yes. Representative Purnell, you're recognized.
Thank you. In the area of raising other funds, on y'all's response is this last paragraph. That paragraph's pretty succinct. It says that $1.5 million went for non-game and endangered species, and of course that's not a great price to pay to keep these species and whatnot. I watch Tennessee Wildside as often as possible, and I think that what you do actually is more popular. I mean, has additional popularity among non-hunters, and I just don't know if we've really gone out there and asked non-hunters to provide more money. Do you have any? When we had a recession before, we asked at the state parks people to contribute, and and it did raise some money. Do y'all have any ideas about how to get money from non-hunters that are enjoying the benefits of TWRA?
We've had a number over the years that we've looked at. I guess last month met with the Tennessee Citizens for Wilderness Planning, and that was a topic of discussion. I mean, how could they contribute to the agency's financial backing? And we discussed several different ways. They suggested coming up with a license, for lack of a better word, that they could buy that would be specifically earmarked for non-game. The problem we have when we do that, of course, is that we get no federal match for any of that, and we'd prefer it go the other way. But I guess the short answer would be we've looked at a whole array of things. The Watchable Wildlife Fund that we've created through the license plate it's reliable but not adequate in terms of the amount of people that do it. We've tried to have a push forward on that. So yeah, we're looking at a whole group of different ways to do that. There's 2 or 3 citizens groups that are meeting on their own to try to come up with a reliable long-term funding strategy. Don't know what that's going to be, but we're certainly open to any suggestions.
Okay, I'm glad you are really looking into that. People need to contribute more. And, of course, we may be in a situation where we're going to really need to ask people to come forward. I know that years ago that public TV around the state got more money, and then when the state cut the budget, public TV got on the television and said, look, the state's cut our budget. We need more money from the viewers. And I think it worked. So I'm not interested in cutting the budget. I'm just saying at all. I'm just saying as you need more money, there ought to be a way we should all try to think of a way to get more money donated out of the non-hunter community. And
we would agree.
Let me ask just a couple quick things that are not really audit related, if I may. Just do we have a problem with snakeheads?
Yes.
Because I know that Arkansas, it seems like they went along the East Coast, but then there's some in Arkansas. I'm not talking about paddlefish or the flying fish. Where's our snakehead problem?
It's not nearly as big of a problem as the Asian carp, that has come into the Tennessee River system and on the Mississippi. That's a problem worldwide, nationwide. You might notice that President Obama just appointed a person to look specifically at that problem nationwide in terms of the Asian carp and the silver carp. The snakehead as yet is not a big problem in Tennessee, not nearly as much as the others.
I mean Asian carp. Is it in any streams, or is it just somebody may have put them in a lake? Or
no, they moved through the Mississippi River system, and so now they're in the Ohio, they're in the Tennessee, they're in Kentucky Lake. So any of those offshoots of those river systems, they're becoming a big problem because they essentially eat the plankton and so forth that supply the nutrients to those other fish from the game fish on down. So there's no market for them. There's nobody that wants to fish for them. There's actually a grant been given to a couple universities. They're trying to establish a way that people can utilize them. So right now we don't really know where we're going to go with it. You might notice all the things that are going on in the Great Lakes. They're doing their best to keep them out of there because they expect it would ruin the entire fishery.
Have the Asian carp ever met the snakeheads to see who wins? I mean, is there a place in Tennessee where they've come together and see what happens?
I'm not sure.
If snakeheads could eat a lot of the Asian carp, then we'd only have one to deal with. The other thing is, what about spongiform encephalitis, the mad cow disease? Y'all had put out warnings about squirrels and others. What's that status?
Primarily, we're mostly interested in the chronic wasting disease that affects deer and any of the other cervids. Virginia became a positive state this year, along with Missouri. So we have states on both sides of us that have become positive. We haven't yet. We implemented regulations to keep the movement of those body parts that would contain any of the spinal column that would carry that disease from coming into the state. So far, it's worked. It may be more of a problem yet to come, but we're doing everything we can to keep it out.
So who gives you the neurological parts, the spine, the brain, all that? Where do you get that to test the animals?
The Southeastern Cooperative Wildlife Disease Study in Georgia, the University of Georgia, does all of the Southeastern wildlife agencies contract with them. They have humongous, for lack of a better word, center down there for doing all kinds of wildlife disease testing, and that's one of the places we last year they tested in excess of 46,000 deer and other types of cervid for chronic wasting disease.
Some of the Tennessee deer?
Yes.
Okay.
We have a program where we take X number of deer each year out of certain counties and out of certain border states around us, and they all go there to see if there's intermingling of the herds, and also to find out whether or not there's actually any spread of the disease across those states that are yet not positive.
Okay, just one other question. The bringing elk back, is there a natural enemy of elk that's still here that is giving a problem, or is that working?
The only natural one would be on the really young calves. Sometimes coyotes can be a problem on young elk calves, but outside of that, we hear reports of mountain lions in areas. We have yet to document that, but at this point I'd say we don't have any. Bear could. They're more of an omnivore. You know, they're going to take whatever's most easy to get to at the time. So we don't have a big problem with them and elk right now.
Yeah.
According to the clock, we've been here about 5.5 hours, and
No wonder I
5
feel
hours
uneasy.
and now 40 minutes.
Representative Cooper.
Time flies when you're chairman.
That's right. You're right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to everybody. I apologize for getting here late. Is this Mr. Ed Carter?
Yes, ma'am. It is.
Okay, yeah, Wildlife.
Yes.
I just wanted to follow up on an issue that I have in Meeman Shelby Forest in Shelby County. We have a boat ramp that's been promised to us about 10 years. I think we did some patchwork with them, with the Corps of Engineer and Wildlife Agency. I think
We did.
Yeah, and do you know whether we're going to be able to do, I know the economy is bad, whether the fishermen had me in a meeting, about 35 of them, and I did have a call from the constituent about a month ago. They're following up on it. They're still having some problems with that boat ramp down there. It's dangerous, and they can't, it's just rugged in that area. Can you give me any information on that, or please, or maybe you can share with me later?
The larger ramp that we'd actually hoped to implement it to replace a lot of those was on the Wolf River. The land acquisition fell through with us on that one, so we're looking at the repairs on that one. The fact that there is low water on the Mississippi and a lot of the others has given us a little bit of both ways. It's a problem and a help. You can do better repair when the water's down, but at times when it's at a certain level, it makes repairs even worse. We did go through and identify those areas in each of the areas around Shelby County and up through all the way up through Dyersburg, actually, and looking at where the best place to either implement a new ramp or repair the ones we have, and we've obligated the money for that. And hopefully, if the water conditions and weather conditions stay right, we can go back and do those repairs.
We do expect to do some repairs, and I can report that back to the fishermen.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you so much. It's good to see you here today.
I think part of the additional pressure is that they are working on some of those ramps. They're working on the ramp at Mud Island, so there's several up and down through there that are closed, and that work can only be done at a low water level. So it's put additional pressure on the ones that are open.
Representative Cornell.
Yes, Representative Cooper has made a point about that area. That area is one of the highest tourist destination areas in Memphis, between Bill Street, Elvis Mansion, and the casinos. And I think the state of Tennessee at some point needs to, both you and the Department of Environment, need to look at what you can do to tap that. There's tons of people in that area. Now, right south of the border, Lakeview has a boat ramp in the lake. I hear they're closing for 4 or 5 months in the winter for hunters. And so if they start closing every winter for hunters, then I guess people will be going to different other places. That might actually help us.
Thank you, Representative Cornell. Public comments. Are there any public comments relative to this hearing? Seeing none, I would yield to Senator Watson.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we have to determine what kind of recommendation we would like to make to the full committee. I do need to ask a question before doing that. When is you said that this spring the advisory committee, the advisory group would be meeting again and forwarding an opinion to TWRA. When is that expected?
They met in April of last year. That was before their normal meeting date. You know what? It's
I don't know exactly when it is. We can get that back to you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, what I would move to do is I would move to, this specific issue is of interest to a number of members in both of our legislative bodies here, and I would move to defer a recommendation to the full standing committees and allow, I know from this area we will have one new elected House member. I don't know whether he will be on government operations in the House or not. But before making a recommendation, I think that those members ought to have an opportunity, particularly that member, to survey this situation particularly, and then we can certainly in the Senate, assuming that I'm going to remain on government operations, we can look at our calendar as to when we would want to schedule that review hearing, so we might allow for a little more input relative to that one issue. Otherwise, I'm very satisfied with, as I was last year, with the progress that TWRA has made relative to the specific audit findings. But this specific one issue has become a very important interest to members of both of our bodies, particularly how TWRA responds to a recommendation from one entity or another entity. So with that, I would move that because we're not required to make a recommendation, I would move that we defer recommendation to the full standing committees.
And the full standing committee would meet probably whenever.
Well, it would be scheduled along with the others, during session. Obviously, in TWRA, as they're very familiar with the process, they would be noticed of when there would be heard. But that would allow for particularly the new member coming into the House who's representing this area to get, if not already up to speed, we can ensure that they are up to speed, and it will help us in our deliberations. So that would be my motion, Mr.
So we
Chairman.
have a motion to defer recommendation to the full standing committee. It's been seconded. You're recognized.
I agree. This is a really important agency, and that's why I wouldn't want to give it more than 4, because it is so important. And we've got so many new members who are actually out there hunting, fishing. They're going to be bringing in information that we don't have. So I agree with you. I think deferring to listen to a lot of our new members about the agency and how it affects our district is important. But just because it's a commission, this is actually a really, really significant department in a sense. So I hope we don't suddenly get slack and just say, oh, Now, no offense to y'all, but I'm saying y'all are just extremely important. They have regulatory authority. They can regulate county by county. The Constitution gives the legislature special ability to do that. They have police power. They have almost a fee power, and I think it's just real important. And we got a constitutional amendment that relates to your.
So we have a motion and a second to defer to the full standing committee. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? So moved. Okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We'll see you again soon.
Okay.
Thank you. Further? Any further business? Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Good job.